Good morning, everyone. We're just going to give a few minutes for everyone to join and then we'll get started. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation on social media addiction. Today's session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the CMH YouTube channel for future reference. Please feel free to use the chat box for all questions or comments. Our presenter will be answering questions as time allows. Continuing education credits are offered for today's presentation. If you're requesting professional credits, you must remain on the webinar the entire time and complete the survey at the end of the presentation to receive credit. Our presenter today is Trooper Corey Hebner from the Michigan State Police. Welcome, Corey.
Hey, good morning. How are you? That wasn't rhetorical. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Woo! Because I'll tell you what, even though we're talking about technology, it never ceases to fail you when you least likely need it to. So just wanted to make sure we're on the same page. Today we're talking about social media addiction. This is kind of the part 2, and some of you guys have seen me in different places, and we really wanted to try to build upon what we were talking about. But the first thing that we'll do is actually go back a little bit and talk about some of the terms that we talked about in one. First one is instant gratification, and this term is best shown by how kids or adults, for that matter, use their social media and how we're completely different than we were 40 years ago. Think about our world, right? Little Corey this time of year would probably be sitting down, in his underoos watching, cartoons on Saturday, and he would grab the wish book, either JCPenney or Sears, and you'd circle about 14 or 15 different things, and then you would wait, a month and a half and see what Santa Claus brought you. Kids today don't do that, right? They go on Amazon and it drops the next day. So we have no ability to sustain, thinking about things in the long term. It's all quick and easy and fast. And we complain when it's not here in 2 days, right? We would have to wait a week and a half, 2 weeks when we saw that first commercial advertising for a movie before we could go to a movie theater. And now, you just sit and binge watch 8 episodes of Stranger Things from the comforts of your own bedroom. Matter of fact, there's even another phenomenon within this where people will wait till the end of the season so they can then binge all 8, 10, 12 episodes of that season. So instant gratification really drives everything that we do. And the problem is advertising world really took notice of this very quickly, and they've set things up around it. So for instance, right, you remember old-fashioned YouTube 8 years ago when the commercials were at the end of the video? Well, nobody watched, right? Nobody stayed around and watched. And so that's one of the things that they find. Matter of fact, this drives so much of what kids do. Think about all of the music and shows where you actually pay extra money just so you're not, bombarded with commercials. And so that's part of instant gratification. The other thing that feeds into it is when we slide over to social media and then we talk about, do we actually look at the contract that we sign before we download these apps? No, we check a box, we hit install. Why? My friend's got it. If my friend's got it, it's got to be good. So why not? And so it really drives everything that we do, and it's changed advertising specifically, but it's changed a lot of different things. Peer recommendation kind of works the same way because of that instant gratification and the fact that we aren't commercialized. What happens is it's monkey see, monkey do, right? My friend has an app. I think it's cool. I download it. 85 to 90% of what is purchased, used, consumed, or downloaded is because it's recommended by a friend. And that number is going to drive even higher. So if I can get in a certain demographic or age group, I can actually then start to feed how I get passed around, or word of mouth makes me pop up in that demographic. Look at what happened with our social media with Twitter/X. Look at what's happened with Telegraph and some of these other apps where they're almost political party driven as well as, right? Why? Because they marketed to certain people within that demographic, and that's how they chose to raise their groupship. And so those are parts of the things that we're now starting to see. Third trend that we talked about earlier is a compulsion loop. A compulsion loop is all of these things in games and apps that make us want to touch them, watch them, or look at them again. And it's very intentional. The reason that the ringtones vibrate and do all these things, one, we have a FOMO, fear of missing out. So because we have a fear of missing out, psychologically, we feel like we have to put ourselves out there on certain things at certain times. The other thing is phantom vibration syndrome. These compulsion loops work so well that we actually think we have now perceived an itch or a twitch from our phone, and now we'll pick it up and look at it, and the phone never actually did that. So compulsion loops are very powerful. They're not just a psychological or a visual thing, because of the fact that our phones vibrate. And so that's also really interesting. And so I equate it to this, right? Back in the 80s, what would some of us do? Well, we play Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, right? So you could memorize that little maze to eat all the pellets and gobble up all the ghosts and clear the screens. Well, it's the same thing when kids jump off the battle bus and grab some slurp juice and a chug jug and play Fortnite, right? They tend to go around the island the same way because they know where the good guns are and other equipment in the game, so they can try to win that level or get a dub. Yes, I do play Fortnite because of my kids when they were still here in high school, and so it's really funny to watch how, even though the game is obviously a lot better visually, it's more stunning, it's whatever, kids operate the same way. And so these compulsion loops drive everything, right? Number one video game demographic is actually 35 to 55-year-old women. It's not a shoot 'em up game. The most popular video game is a phone type video game, Candy Crush. So yeah, we like to pick on the kids all the time, but we really can't do that. Addiction is addiction, and how we use our social media really goes through different age groups. But the one thing that is different, right? We both have an addiction to that dopamine. But the one thing that is different when we talk about kids specifically is isolation. Now, hopefully, we're starting to grow out of isolation in our junior high years, our high school years. But we've also seen statistically where social media, we know the people that are addicted more to social media, especially social media sites that are chat type, right? Like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, it does lead to higher rates of depression. So we know that isolation is a thing, but it really starts in junior high. And the reason it starts in junior high is because what a junior high kiddo is going through, right? They're trying to develop their own social mores and norms. And so as I try to do this, it's like kingdom harvesting, right? I want to have my own kingdom. Arr, and I want to keep the parents away. But the problem is I think that by asking an adult to lower that drawbridge on my kingdom and let the adults come into my room, come have a conversation with me. God forbid we actually have a family meal and talk over the dinner table. What that does is it doesn't allow me, I'm giving up power and control as a kid. And it couldn't be further from the truth, right? We as adults, we need adults to talk about with adult things to adult all the time, if adulting is a verb. But the problem is kiddos think they give up power and control, And it means that they can't do that job that they want so desperately to do. They want to show that they're grown-up people. The other big thing is they're very secretive with their information, and social media allows them to do that. So then they go out there and they seek information almost anonymously. They think that they're anonymous, but they're not. And so that's what we're really going to do a deep dive into today, because there's a lot of things that are risky in this behavior. And we think that social media keeps us safe, and it really doesn't. And so we really want to breach into that. First video. This is really going to talk about that dopamine. It's called Five
Now,
Crazy
a
Ways
non-invasive lift for
Social
face and
Media
neck.
Changes Your Brain.
New rock firming serum
Problem
stick
is I can't
with our number one.
bypass
With
YouTube.
social media sites being used by 1/3 of the entire world, they've clearly had a major influence on society. But what about our bodies? Here are 5 crazy ways that social media and the internet are affecting your brain right now. Can't log off? Surprisingly, 5 to 10% of internet users are actually unable to control how much time they spend online. Though it's a psychological addiction as opposed to a substance addiction, brain scans of these people actually show a similar impairment of regions that those with drug dependence have. Specifically, there's a clear degradation of white matter in the regions that control emotional processing, attention, and decision making. Because social media provides immediate rewards with very little effort required, your brain begins to rewire itself, making you desire these stimulations. And you begin to crave more of this neurological excitement after each interaction. Sounds a little like a drug, right? We also see a shift when looking at multitasking. You might think that those who use social media or constantly switch between work and websites are better at multitasking, but studies have found that when comparing heavy media users to others, they perform much worse during task switching tests. Increased multitasking online reduces your brain's ability to filter out interferences and can even make it harder for your brain to commit information to memory. Like when your phone buzzes in the middle of productive work. Or wait, did it even buzz? Phantom vibration syndrome is a relatively new psychological phenomenon where you think you felt your phone go off, but it didn't. In one study, 89% of test subjects said they experienced this at least once every 2 weeks. It would seem that our brains now perceive an itch as an actual vibration from our phone. As crazy as it seems, technology has begun to rewire our nervous system, and our brains are being triggered in a way they never have before in history. Social media also triggers a release of dopamine, the feel good chemical. Using MRI scans, scientists found that the reward centers in people's brains are much more active when they're talking about their own views as opposed to listening to others. Not so surprising, we all love talking about ourselves, right? But it turns out that while 30 to 40% of face to face conversations involve communicating our own experiences, around 80% of social media communication is self involved. The same part of your brain related to orgasms, motivation, and love are stimulated by your social media use, and even more so when you know you have an audience.
And so that's kind of the interesting part, right? We know that when we have likes and follows, that it's more popular. We'll actually get people that, well, geez, my post from last week it had more likes on it. I must have done something wrong, right? And it makes no logical sense why we would do that, right? There's a lot of reasons why more people might have been online last week, and we also know that the way social media works, that might not have gotten pushed out to as many people, but we still do it, don't we? The other thing in that is the reason that people uh, would rather do chat or text rather than face to face communication is because in face to face communication, uh, with the exception of right now, um, right? If you control more than half of that conversation, you're being rude. But you can be in Snapchat and fire off 15, 16 snaps to a friend. You don't even have to wait for a response. And socially, that's not rude at all. And so we find a lot of different things because of social media. It's really changed the way that we think. Uh, Here's the other thing, though. Parents really do have FOMO, fear of missing out, not on what they do. They're worried about their kids. And so it's really driven this whole thing that we have talked about. Are your kids truly missing out, or are your kiddos just trying to go through this whole thing of social media? And it's really interesting, right? Look at this statistic. Parents know that kiddos being addicted to gaming systems, the use of time that they have with smartphones and tablets, they try to limit that, but they also say that sometimes they don't because they're worried about what their kids are doing. Here's another one. The doom scrolling, and we'll talk about this, right? The way that this stuff is set up on YouTube and TikTok specifically, because YouTube and TikTok are different. We'll talk about why later. Parents know that their kids watch too much of this, right? However, they still allow them to do this. And so that's what we talk about with the roller coaster of the internet, right? The doom scrolling. That's just one of those things where we all of a sudden have this horrible thing where we have a ton of dopamine being released. And that's why this whole doom scrolling thing works. The cell phone addiction. And again, don't understand why we have so many things and differences between iPhones and Androids. But look at that. iPhone users, and I'm sure that this was a study that somebody did during COVID, just so we understood, health-wise what we did. But look at how many times people look at their screens, unlock their screens, and it's amazing, right? So we do have an addiction. And the sad thing is, and I brought up, this to our troops. I said, hey, listen, when is the one time that you can in peace and quiet look at your cell phone and not get bothered? And they started laughing and they're like, yeah, well, if we're unlocking our phone that many times a day and we go to the bathroom and we're good at washing our hands in the bathroom, right? Hopefully, do we actually wipe down our phones? Just something, just food. No, not food for thought. That's kind of gross. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. It was totally unintended. So when we talk about this, the other thing is look at how many kiddos by age 11 have access to a cell phone. I equate this to some of the games that our tobacco industry did in the 30s and 40s when they knew that kids and cartoons and flavorings, and that's why flavorings were illegal for so long in tobacco product, right? Especially stick cigarettes. They knew that these things were more attractive to kids. Is this also the reason that Apple allowed free iPads to classrooms? I don't know, but we know that addiction is addiction. And the younger that you get exposed to an addictive product, harder it is to break that cycle later. I think it's interesting. We also look at some of the screen time. Some of the screen time that we have really changed over COVID or maybe because of COVID. So this is just from 2019 to 2021. Remember, we get hit March or April of 2020. So all of a sudden things change. Look at that screen time getting driven up, even in 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. So that's a huge uptick in screen time for both age groups there.
Project 2025 is Donald Trump's plan to seize total power.
I will
Project
try to get this
2025
thing.
would weaponize the
I can't
Department of
download
Justice,
videos
ban
because of the
abortion
state
nationwide,
firewalls.
end the
So
Affordable Care
unfortunately, we
Act,
got
and
to link
eliminate
it
the
this way.
Department of Education.
I can't stop looking at my phone, but I'm not alone. Over 2.5 billion people have smartphones now, and a lot of them are having a hard time putting them down.
There's a new app that aims to curb phone addiction.
Addiction is money.
Are we a nation of smartphone addicts?
The problem is, our devices are designed to keep us engaged. They're intentionally addicting. But if you understand the tricks that grab your attention, you can learn to have a healthier relationship with your phone.
I think we're living inside of 2 billion Truman shows where, Truman Show, you wake up and everything is sort of coordinated just for you and you usually don't even realize it. But it's coordinating just to entertain you or just to engage you.
That's Tristan Harris. He worked as Google's design ethicist, and now he runs a nonprofit initiative called Time Well Spent, advocating for awareness of how tech companies profit off of users' attention.
It's not designed to help us. It's just designed to keep us hooked.
So I handed him my phone and asked him how he'd fix it. It starts with turning off all notifications, except for when a real human is trying to reach you. When you get a call, a text, or a message, it's usually because another person wants to communicate with you. But a lot of today's apps simulate the feeling of that kind of social interaction to get you to spend more time on their platform. If Facebook sends you a push notification that a friend is interested in an event near you, they're essentially acting like a puppet master, leveraging your desire for social connection so that you use the app more. But notifications didn't always work like this. When push notifications were first introduced for email on Blackberries in 2003, they were actually seen as a way for you to check your phone less. You could easily see emails as they came in, so you didn't have to repeatedly open your phone to refresh an inbox. But today you can get notifications from any app on your phone. So every time you check it, you get this grab bag of notifications that can make you feel a broad variety of emotions.
If it wasn't random, if it was predictably bad or predictably good, then you would not get addicted. The predictability would take out the addictiveness.
That's the same logic behind slot machines. And it's effective. Slot machines make more money in the US than baseball, movies, and theme parks combined. And they become addicting about 3 to 4 times faster than other kinds of gambling. Some apps even replicate the process of pulling a slot machine lever with the pull to refresh feature. That's a conscious design choice. Those apps are usually capable of continuously updating content, but the pull action provides an addicting illusion of control over that process. In the future, we might see healthier ways of delivering notifications. Research shows that bundling notifications, where phones deliver a batch of updates at set times, reduces user stress. Then, you have to grayscale your screen. The easiest way to attract your eye's attention on a screen is through color. Human eyes are sensitive to warm colors. In eye tracking tests like this one, they gravitate particularly to bright red. That's why so many apps have redesigned their icons to be brighter, bolder, and warmer over the years. It's also why notification bubbles are red. A little icon like this, or this, doesn't have the same impact on your attention as this. But you can neutralize that distracting effect by selecting a grayscale color filter in your phone's accessibility settings. When you make everything black and white, your brain isn't tricked into thinking this is any more important to you than this.
I mean, there's a reason why slot machines are, bright in color and have flashing lights and ding, 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 ding. They have the sensory input too, right? And so just noticing that if I take out the color, it changes the some of the addictiveness.
Finally, restrict your home screen to everyday tools.
Make sure that your home screen, when you unlock it, doesn't have anything except for the in-the-moment tools that help you live your life. I have Lyft to get somewhere when I need to get somewhere, maps, calendar. None of these are apps that I can fall into and then get sucked down in some bottomless vortex of stuff.
If you're not sure what counts as a bottomless vortex of stuff, it helps to filter out apps that use infinite scrolling. Unlike pagination, where users have to click to load new content on another page, infinite scrolling continuously loads new material, so there's no built-in endpoint. Video autoplay works in a similar way. These interfaces create a frictionless experience, but they also reduce a user's sense of control and make it harder to stop. Research shows that people rely on visual cues more than internal cues to stop consuming something. In a 2005 study, individuals who ate soup out of a self-refilling bowl ate 73% more than those who ate out of a normal bowl filled up by servers. But those who ate from the self-refilling bowls didn't feel any more satisfied. So a visual cue, like an endpoint, is better at telling you the right time to stop than your own sense of satisfaction. And because so many apps don't have an endpoint, you have to build your home screen around the eventuality of distraction. We check our phones a lot. Most of us drastically underestimate how often we do so. But technology might not always look this way. There are ideas for alternative interfaces that give you functional choices and are more transparent about how much time you'll lose with one action versus another.
But it's a really deep philosophical question. What is genuinely worth your attention on an interrupted basis? Do people even know how to answer that question? It's a really hard question. It's not something we think about.
But for now, it's a question that everybody needs to start asking. Thank you so much for watching. This has been episode.
And so that really is the big question. So now that we've kind of learned some of these tricks and tools and talked about some of this terminology, knowing that you have the difference between pagination and endless scrolling, it's really interesting to know, especially like YouTube and TikTok, when they just continuously feed you the next video, right? We know that unpredictability is part of what makes it addictive, right? If you were just scrolling and seeing French bulldogs wrestling in the yard all the time, eventually the cuteness would wear off. Maybe not, but you get the point. And so that unpredictability is also part of it. It's really interesting because he makes the the connection with slot machines and how you refresh is that simulation of pulling a slot handle. The other thing that you never really see in casinos, right? Windows and clocks. If you look at some of the apps that people go into, some you still see your screen top, right? But there are some apps specifically where when you go in that app, you cannot see the time. That's intentional. A lot of the gaming things. Now, can you go behind the scenes and find out how much time you spend in each app? Absolutely. Can you get on your kids' PS and Xbox and find out how much time they're spending on specific games or on that console completely? Sure, you can. So those features are there. And so that's what I do. When we talk about addiction, and we'll get into this a little bit later, addiction is addiction. So what I try to tell kids when we have conversations about the social media or the gaming systems that they use, try to cut it in half, right? Try to catch yourself when you're doing that endless, mindless scrolling. If it's for a purpose or a reason, if you're doing homework, obviously that's a good thing. But cut down that other time and try to cut it in half. So that's kind of the challenge that I had, not knowing about what we're going to talk about at the end with the social media detox. And so that was kind of interesting that it popped up. Now, earlier we had talked about what kids do and that kind of that trend in junior high. They seek and search for information. And so there used to be a couple old sites, Ask, Whisper, Omegle, kind of, sort of. This is Discord. If you've never seen the desktop version of Discord, but what they are is places where you can go, post something, and within 3, 4, 5 minutes, you can get a couple responses, and you think that you're anonymous. The problem is you're really never truly anonymous. If you have a username and a router, you can get information on where that person lives. Most people don't know that their router has a physical address listed with it. You can go in Router World, just like a big giant phone book, and if you put in the information for that router, you can find a geo address. And so it is just like a big electronic phone book. And that freaks people out. And I'm like, why? We've had phone books sit in people's kitchens for 50, 60 years. There really is no difference. Some router companies will allow you to even have a private or an unlisted router information. But how you go about that is with your internet provider. So you have to make sure that you contact them and ask if they will allow that, or if you have to pay for that to be allowed, or if they don't allow it. But again, if we go back to Discord, right? Let's look at this. This is fulfilling those definitions that we talked about earlier, right? I post something that's embarrassing, and within 3, 4, 5 minutes, I get 15 responses, right? So that is instant gratification. And because young people use these sites mostly, right, that is peer recommendation. So it fulfills those two things that I really, really seek. The problem is I get 8 responses, 7 are positive. They're like, yeah, this is, you made a good decision. What happens when we have that one piece of negative feedback? That's right. Even though we don't know who it's coming from, we allow that one piece of negative feedback to have more levity, and it affects us when people make, negative comments. And so that becomes the part of the illogical things that we do with our social media. And it's really kind of interesting. The other thing is uh, every app has the ability to have secret folders where you can hide videos, you can hide pictures, you can hide contact information. Not all apps have them, but most apps all have that ability. Plus, there are also other apps that's their only function. They look like the calculator app, or they look like something else. The icon looks like something generic, but it is a vault that holds certain things. Matter of fact, one of these is called Vaulty. But that's what it does. It hides conversations, files, videos, pictures. And kids want to be secretive, right? They don't want, and it's not just kids, right? Adults do it too. Unfortunately, it's sometimes for the same reasons, sometimes for different reasons. But you got to remember, in junior high, what are we seeking out information on, right? What is that one big thing that kids are seeking out information on? Because they want to be adults, they're not there yet. the biggest thing that they ask questions about is sex. The problem is they're video driven, and all of our social media is video driven. So these poor kids, they're not just asking questions about sex. When they go to YouTube and they Google information or content, they get video. So the problem is they relate sex to pornography. And the problem is they don't understand or they can't differentiate the difference between sex and pornography. So when we talk about all of these expectations that kids have and how they've gotten their information, if this is where they're seeking information, this is a big, big thing. This might explain a lot of this confusion that we have going on right now. And here's the big part of it. Parents are also confused because three-quarters of parents, 75% of parents, when asked, they said, "Oh my God, my kid would have never done that." Well, of those 75% of kids, 53% of those kids said, "Yeah, I've done that." Right? Think about your own, you know, beginnings when you started asking questions about sexuality. When did those start? And so that's when did some of your classmates start, right? You had a lot of people maybe around you that were earlier or later. But it really is one of those things that drive what kids are seeking information for. And again, I'm not trying to plug a product, but this is one site where I do say to parents, because Chris does have pay things in this site, but Protect Young Eyes, one of the biggest things that they advocate for is don't um, have conversations that are one-way conversations with kids. Make sure that if you're having this conversation and you say, "Hey, I got to have your phones in the living room every night," well, your phone better be there too. Don't be hypocritical about the rules that you have in your family. Because if you're consistent, right? If you say to your kid that I can check your phone at any time, well, it better be a two-way street. And so the other thing that Chris advocates for on his website and when you talk to him is making sure that you set the rules on the router, not just a phone. And it's very, very important. The reason is because a lot of kids can access their social media on a lot of different ways. One, you can take a Kindle, right? Something that's designed for reading. You can still download apps on that. You can access all of your apps on your PlayStation, your Xbox. I know kids that specifically have have gotten a burner phone, right? $20, they got one of those preloaded pay-as-you-go phones. Well, they're not using it to make phone calls, but they have the phone now. So if they get in trouble and they get their phone taken away, they have a second device. Matter of fact, uh, I have some kids, they're smart enough to not use mom and dad's router, and they actually sponge Wi-Fi from the neighbor because they're close enough and it's not password protected. That's how they order their vape juice. And then they call in sick when that stuff gets delivered from Amazon so they can get their vape juice. Kids are very ingenious. Uh, they also share how to do these things. You can even go on YouTube and find out how to do stuff. Um, and it's not all bad. I'm not a very smart guy when it comes to, being very mechanical. But I went on YouTube real quick and learned how to change my dryer filament. And in 5 minutes, I was able to take it out, put in a new dryer filament, and have my dryer work. And so there's amazing things that you can do with technology, but kids are also learning how to circumvent social rules. So it's really important that we understand that, and making sure that you limit what the router can do kind of nips that in the whole bud, unless they're accessing information from somebody else's router, which is totally possible too, right? Now, some of the terminology that we have, the sextortion, the soliciting of a minor, bullying, role playing. Um, a lot of parents maybe understand some of this and some don't. The reason that this is important is because a lot of this information can be found online. So when we talk about all of these games that we play on Facebook, what are some of the things that they ask? Right? Personal information, but why does somebody need to know your high school's mascot, your first pet's name? These are very, very close to a lot of what banking institutions use for your credit card or for passwords, or password recovery when you forget your passwords with your social media. So there is fear out there that a lot of these apps are designed for people that are taking this information and then cataloging it and selling it on the dark web. And then all of a sudden, I know we get this feedback. What's the dark web? Well, the dark web is a place that's not normally associated with regular browsers. So, we use the big four here, right? You have Internet Explorer, Chrome, Firefox, maybe Google, Internet Explorer, some of those sites. So if you don't use a traditional connection there, if you're going to something that bounces a VPN like a Tor or some of these other places, um, they're accessing the information in different ways, and it is harder to track the location of where those VPNs are, and that's why. The other thing that we have that's going on is sexually explicit images or nudes or child pornography. In the state of Michigan, we do not differentiate between a 70-year-old person that's looking at pictures of little people as opposed to that 17-year-old boyfriend, girlfriend that are sharing images. If it's under the age of 18, it's technically illegal in a state. Now, some states have differentiated this. I know most prosecutors' offices in our state, they really don't want to deal with this unless they have to. The problem is the harm that it can cause. And obviously that's going to be, a case by case basis. But statistically speaking, 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 3 boys have said that they have shared a not so nice selfie, something that should be covered by a bathing suit. The problem is adults, we get it wrong. 80% of females and 60% of males have shared at least one not so nice selfie. Um, so we as adults don't get it right when it's age appropriate, whatever age appropriate means, right? So yeah, we share these pictures. Okay, so what's the harm? Well, the harm is all of these things. One, it's illegal for young people, right? We have, did you produce the picture or persuade someone to take the picture? That right there, just the taking of the picture is a 20-year felony. Now, if you distributed or shared it to one person, right, the boyfriend or the girlfriend, you can add 7. You possessed it at one time because you took it. That's a 4-year felony. And then you can also add 5-year felony for using a computer in a commission of a crime. So you have all those things for child sexually abusive material, right? Or child pornography. But then you have all these other things that are associated with um, pictures, even if it's an adult, right? Now you also have, we have sextortion and all these other things that pop up. We had the case of the kiddo up in Marquette who he basically gets swatted by this group of people from Africa, and he thinks he's sending an age appropriate girl a picture, even though it might be inappropriate. What they had done very easily is they cloned. And if you guys have been on Facebook and you get a friend request from someone that is your friend, but it doesn't look the same, if they put just a space or something different in that vanity name, they can remember profile pics are public. So they can capture that person, that friend of yours profile pic. They change one of those little things in that vanity name. And now they've created a complete profile. And when you and a whole bunch of other people have now friended them, they go and they grab all that clip art, they create this fake profile. Now they have a way to communicate with you, and you think it's your friend. And so, what happens when people are your friends on social media? They are allowed access to everything that you post, all of your pictures, who your like and common friends are, right? Maybe your whole friends list. It depends on how you have your safety and security set up in the app. And so they might have access to everything and they can see everything that you do. That's one of the ways that we actually have people know that people are on spring break. And so when they're on spring break, they load up a moving van and wipe out their whole house. We've had this happen in several metropolitan areas, and they do it because of, posting on social media when people are on vacation. So this isn't anything new. It really gets scary though when we had this whole situation like the kiddo, because what they did is they then exploited him for money, right? They said, "Hey, we have your friends list." He's like, "No, you don't." They're like, "Yes, we do." They sent one of the pics to everybody on his friends list. He was so embarrassed that grandma or an aunt or somebody on that friends list saw a picture of him, he suicided. And so it was really horrific, right? And so what we found is state of Michigan, the attorney general has now extradited 2 or 3 of the actors of this scam back to Michigan, but this poor kid already did this, right? And it's horrible for a grieving family, especially with everything that we got going on. So this hit home for me, and my kid calls me from college. I have 2 college age kids, and my oldest calls me. He says, "Dad, hypothetically speaking, what would happen if?" I'm like, "Oh my God, Kyle, please tell me what you did." I'll pick on Kyle because Kyle's fun. He says, "Dad, I swear to God, it wasn't me." I'm like, "Dude, please just tell me what happened." It was a teammate of his. He plays both hockey and baseball, and one of his teammates had talked to what he thought was an age appropriate person, 22, 23 years old, right? And now that nude was being extorted. He had already given up, I think, $100 in green dot cards or prepaid credit cards. And he's like, he's worried that they're going to go through their whole friends list. And I'm like, okay, well, here's what you need to do: have him get in front of this, have him tell everybody on his social media that he has a crazy ex girlfriend that faked a picture of him. Oh, hey, yeah. It's a way to save face. It's a way to, in this day and age, and we're going to talk about it later. Can you do this? Oh, absolutely. So, is it a fake picture? Is it a real picture? Your grandma, your aunt, they're not going to know the difference. So, even though it is a real picture, if he gets in front of it and tells everybody it's fake, at least it already got in front of the shockingness of what's going to transpire. And so that's what we did. And so he actually contacted everybody in his friends list, and they actually never contacted him. Once he stopped that communication, they never posted any of the pictures on his friends list. So he was fortunate, but it's a way to deal with that. The problem is when you're trapped in that urgency right off the bat, right? You think it's the end of the world. And when we talk about our kiddos, right? 15 to 25, right? Until that frontal lobe is fully developed, that impulse control becomes one of those things that's really tough to mitigate too. And so they think the worst. And unfortunately, they can go to those dark places. So that's another thing that we see when we're talking about social media and that interaction. So, a couple tips that we try to post: our ICAC unit, Internet Crime Against Children unit. That's some of the things that they try to share when they do presentations. Just some basic information for parents. So that is there. And if you click any of those links, our ICAC task force, that's specific to us in Michigan and who they're connected to nationwide. But again, those are all resources. So if you want to go back in the video and find that, I love to share the resources too, because we all have those dumb dad moments. What do I mean? Well, I was a dumb dad too, right? We are a baseball family. I coach high school baseball. My kids play college baseball. And so about 12 years ago, my old lieutenant, Jerry Connors, he left our department and he was the head of security for the Detroit Tigers. And so Jerry calls me one day and he says, "Hey, you want to come down to a game?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And then look what he did for us. I mean, this is just simply amazing. We got to watch batting practice before the game on the field. That's my oldest knucklehead, Kyle. The little tiger hat in the foreground, right? That you can just see the brim of. That's my youngest son, Derek. So they got selfies with Miguel Cabrera, right? I mean, this is like the biggest thing in our family's life at the time, right? Because this is huge. And so what do I do as a dumb dad? I post that as my Instagram pic. The problem is your profile pics are public information. So even if you have all your settings on private, your profile pic is public. This is defined to you in rules of service or terms of service. Remember, we talked 15 minutes ago or half hour ago about terms of service, and all we do is check the box and hit install, right? We don't read these things. We don't read these contracts that we get into with all of these companies. So, how much information can be garnered? Well, if you actually take that picture and save it to a desktop computer, go to file information or file info, It tells you everything about that picture. That metadata is all recorded. Remember Grammy and Grampy when they took the digital pictures 15 years ago and it would time date stamp the little digital picture in the left? Well, our phones and our computers are doing that still today. It's just they're, not making it as public. They're hiding it in the metadata. So you can find out the resolution, the angle. You can take, the aperture setting, right? If you look at the shot, right? 1/1250th of a second. It was taken with an iPhone 5S. And then if you get down to the very, very bottom, now I'm not freaked out. I mean, that looks like it's 47 feet south and west of home plate, Comerica Park in Detroit. What I'm freaked out about is 85 to 90% of the selfies that kids take are taken from the comforts of their own bedroom or bathroom because they want to use the mirror as a reflecting device. And if that metadata, even if they're lying to somebody about their name and their location to try to stay safe, in the metadata of the pictures and the videos that kids take, when they apply that to their social media, they're letting people know where they live. Now, there's an easy way to scrub that data. One, you can actually laboriously go into that file and then delete it all. But if you just simply take the pic or the vid from airplane mode and not use the app, it usually scrubs that metadata. TikTok has said and Snapchat have said that they scrub metadata now before it posts to their platforms. The problem is this isn't always correct. There are times where that metadata doesn't get scrubbed. And if you go back and look, they're about 75, 80% most times. The other problem is, and we'll hear this later as well, TikTok, in their terms of service, they actually have the picture prior to you even posting it. I'll repeat that. They actually have that picture. And even if you think, okay, I'm not going to post this selfie, I'm going to do the right thing, I'm going to delete it. TikTok already has that picture cataloged in their archive with your folder. And so that becomes a really, really crazy thing when we talk about how we get kids to slow down this process. Remember the old pluses and minuses, and you try to weigh a decision. So let's say a kid is actually successful pushing out the dopamine and actually trying to make a logical decision, right? And they're like, yeah, even though this person is cute and I want to interact with them, I'm not going to send this bad selfie. They delete it. TikTok still's got it. So now we got to teach our kids in a different way that this is out there. And again, TikTok is one of these actors, not a huge fan again. And it's not, just TikTok. It's all the way back to the ByteDance parent company when it was still called Musical.ly. They've been cataloging and archiving things, and they're not the only one, right? Why do you think Snapchat has memories? We thought these stories disappeared after 24 hours, right? Because it disappears off of our RAM, not our ROM, the RAM of our phone within 24 hours, right? It disappears. Well, it's still there. And that's how Snapchat created memories. They did that on a day when they had to admit in court that they actually keep this stuff. And so our social media does it for a reason and a purpose. They actually have websites that producers can take any and all of your content that's in the archives, even though you thought it was a private conversation because you only sent it to one person. Under the terms of service, they can take that and they can post it to their websites. Snapchat has a website called snapchatted.com, right? And so all these social media companies have that ability. The other thing is troopers do it too, right? So how many of you guys are into face swapping and some of this technology? We talked about it earlier, right? We talked about how we can use this as a game plan to say, hey, maybe this is a faked photo. Well, these are two of my bosses. Love them dearly. They're great guys, Marty Miller, Don Stewart. And so when Don got promoted, they took a picture. They thought it was funny, right? Because of the height difference. The problem is they have me coming about a week later to do a presentation for all of us. And what does my childish juvenile brain think of when I see a picture like that? Remember, I'm a child born in the 70s, right? So what in the 1990s does that remind you of? Maybe some Schwarzenegger and DeVito? Absolutely. So now you see the face swap with Marty Miller and Don Stewart's faces. And it does look pretty close to being actual, right? That's obviously back before Marty had hair, or maybe it's just his dome and Schwarzenegger's hair. I don't know. I haven't looked that close to it, but it looks pretty good. And I thought that tilt of Don's head was off a little bit until I go back to that other picture of DeVito. But that wasn't where my brain stopped, right? Because Corey's brain just doesn't stop. So we got more, right? Got Austin Powers. So of course, what do you think of? Absolutely. You got Marty on the right, you got Don on the left. He's a little mini me. Yeah, and so the brain keeps working, and I was sick of picking on Marty. So now I start thinking of other people to, bring on board, like Amy Bellinger, trooper out of Flint, right? Game of Thrones fans, there you go. You got Amy on the right, and you got Don on the left. And yeah, that's not the actor. That's actually Don's face with a little bit of hair added and a goatee. And God, it is what it is, right? So, how is face swapping and AI and all this stuff going to change what we see and what we do? Guys, it's only going to get worse. Look at this. This is not Morgan Freeman. This is not Morgan's voice or face. This is completely generated from AI and a creator called Diep Neep. So I have to give a lot of props to him. But watch this.
I am not Morgan Freeman, and what you see is not real. Well, at least in contemporary terms, it is not.
And you can kind of see
What if
the
I were to tell
facial
you that I am
movements,
not
the
even a
rocking
human
of the
being?
body, the head. It's
Would you
not
believe me?
really natural.
What is your perception of reality? Is it the ability to capture, process, and make sense of the information our senses receive? If you can see, hear, taste, or smell something, does that make it real? Or is it simply the ability to feel? I would like to welcome you to the era of synthetic reality. Now, what do you see?
And so that picture that you saw flashing at the end is the creator and this Morgan Freeman creation. The eyes were really the selling point for me because obviously his eyes were very wide when you saw that and open. We don't usually see Morgan Freeman like that. And the voice, God, it was close, wasn't it? But neither the picture nor the voice were Morgan Freeman. That was all completely AI generated. So now all of a sudden, right, we start to run wild with our minds. Well, it's already happened. So back November of last year, New Jersey started this case. A student asks AI, and I don't remember Chat GTP or wherever, right? He asks AI to create a 18-year-old version of a 14-year-old classmate if she were naked. So again, he's not asking for child porn. He's asking for age appropriate pictures of what his poor 14-year-old classmate would look like. Is that illegal? He didn't have AI generate child pornography. The problem is you got to tell me that this poor 14-year-old girl is going to feel less victimized because it's really not actually her picture, even though it looks probably identical to her. I mean, so we all of a sudden now have horrible problems, crimes, um, and we don't know the answer to it because we don't have any rules against it. So how do we apply rules now, or how do we create new rules legislatively? And I would assume that once this gets addressed, it's going to happen fairly quickly, right? We can all see the problem or the stretch with this. The problem is in the meantime, I mean, is it going to make someone feel better or worse? No, they're victimized, period. And so this becomes a thing. And we've never had this issue because technology advances so quickly. We have now problems that we don't have answers for. And so this is going to be part of those things that we have to go through. Working with smartphones. Here's another really good video.
They say one step at a time.
Once we get through the
Think
commercial,
one
sorry.
step ahead. Watch your step. Step it up. We say take your next step with a bullet in your back. Your whole financial picture and path forward, all with Merrill.
Limited resource, and in any particular moment, you can only have that much of it.
We live in an age of constant distractions. 9 to 5 is out, 24/7 is in. With my smartphone in hand, I bring my work with me everywhere. But our devices make us less attentive. Having spent 10 years doing research in neurobiology, I wondered what technology does to our brains. I set out to understand the science of distractions and learn how to be more focused and boost our productivity. By some measures, we're bombarded by more than 63 notifications a day. We receive over 90 emails and write about 40 of them. On average, we switch tasks every 3 minutes. When we face distractions, two areas of the brain, the parietal cortex and the frontal cortex, are in a sort of tug of war with each other. Some research suggests that the parietal cortex responds to distractions. The frontal cortex, which is involved in cognitively demanding tasks, helps us maintain focus. So we get distracted if the activity of the parietal cortex gets through to the frontal cortex. If the frontal cortex can keep the parietal in check, you stay focused. The brain is deciding what's important and what's not, and that takes effort.
Even when you're cleaning your mailbox and you're not actually doing hard cognitive work, you kind of actually are, because there's all these essentially micro decisions. Looking at this email, do I need this? And so each of those decisions requires a little bit more of cognitive effort. And so, but when you add 2,000 of those, you end up with no power to make any other important decisions after that. You feel depleted.
Tell me a little bit about the study that you did focused on email.
What we found was that checking email more frequently throughout the day was associated with feeling more stressed and overwhelmed.
In the study, one group of people were asked to check their email whenever they wanted throughout the day, while the other group had to do it in batches.
We found that people who batched their emails 3 to 5 times a day felt less stressed and less overwhelmed.
Why are these tasks that seem really menial, why are they so stressful and anxiety inducing?
You're basically doing something that other people need. Let's imagine that attention is this calm lake, or the reflecting pool, and then each notification is a little drop in that lake. We can think of the reflectiveness as the ability to actually focus on what's going on around us. But when we have all these drops all the time, now you get a reflecting pool disturbed and frazzled.
If email is like,
and so that becomes really, kind of that big thing, right? How do we do this? Well, one of the terms that you talked about later, and he actually gets into later in that video, what we call batching, where you specifically don't look at your email, you don't look at your phone more than once an hour or every other hour. And you work on your focus, your tasks, maybe even put it in with a little bit of a quick walk around the office, 10, 15 minutes exercise, never hurt anybody. And then you go back when you sit down, you check your phone and deal with that really quick. And then you go back and work on whatever's next. And it really, personally have tried it, and it really helps not feel as stressed. You also have, where you don't feel overwhelmed at the end of the day. You think that you're able to organize things a little bit better. It really, truly does work. The next big thing when we talk about, we've related social media and gaming to gambling. And the gaming industry is one of those things where 329 billion is what they came up with in 2022. And it's really interesting because, especially when we talk about our young people, there's something that's interesting that's gone on in the last couple of years. So when we talk about gambling, we know that cell phones, the way they're designed, Tristan Harris and a couple other people have talked about it. They're designed to look like gambling. So what is there about gambling? Well, remember, what did we do in the last 2 years? Last 2, 3 years, we did something that Ghostbusters told us never to do. We crossed the streams, right? So we took a dopamine releasing activity, gambling, and we crossed it with a dopamine releasing device. So 2.5, 3 years ago is when we started to allow betting on your phones. So instead of leaving your family and going to a casino, right? Or even going down and getting scratch offs at the local convenience store, now you can be in the comforts of your own home and gamble. And so we've seen all of these things pop up and all the advertising that's now also came with it. MGM Grand and Bet Rivers and all these other places. So look at the top statistic. In 2021, gambling hit a record 53 billion in revenue. In 2022, we doubled down, pun intended. In addition to gambling on your phones, we allowed gambling with sports betting. And now look at that number. 2022 wasn't over yet. $80 billion were already wagered on sports betting. So not just the revenue that we had the year before from gambling, but now sports betting, a lot of money. And so I asked my guys again, I'm not in that age demographic. I'm like, what's going on? And we're like, Dad, we've had 2 teammates on each team where moms and dads have had to pull them out of college because they rang up 35, 40 grand in debt, sports betting. They introduced me to the term 3-legged, 4-legged parlay. And I'm like, what is a parlay? Well, here's kind of how it works. And it's really, we need to know this because what happens is on the free site, or if you're not 21, your 3-legged parlay, statistically speaking, has a better percentage of paying off. A parlay, you're not just betting on a team to win, you're hoping that 3 activities during that game happen. So let's say we're going to bet on basketball, right? One player has to hit 20 points, one player has to have 10 rebounds, and then somebody else, or maybe the team, has to hold the other team defensively to under 40 points in the first half, right? And so, statistically speaking, or if it's the under 21 sites, those are statistically going to pay off more often. So, my people that are on these sites feel confident in their abilities. What happens when it's not free or it's over 21? Those odds change. The 3-legged or 4-legged things that have to happen are going to statistically be in favor of the house, right? We see this with casinos too. It's the same thing that we saw with the little apps that pop up and allow you to win from certain times. Statistically speaking, if it's free, it's easier. Statistically speaking, when it's for money, the odds change. Now, most states have specifics. Most states are also different, but they have specifics on when these things are supposed to pay off. It's just like, and it should be in line with the same thing that they do with casinos, right? And so that's why this was all agreed to upon by states governing and the licensing boards. It just made it easier and more accessible. Statistically speaking, it should be the same as what you do in person. However, it still is favoring the house. And the online version, you're paying a lot less employees too, right? You just have to have a couple people that social media that just design these things, as opposed to all the staff that comes with, being an in-person casino. So it really brings a lot of different questions. We know that there's going to be an uptick in addiction to gambling and all of these other issues. Why? Because there's more people doing it statistically, and there's more money being wagered. So I think we haven't seen the numbers yet, but I can guarantee you those numbers are going to go up. The next person that we're going to talk to, this guy, he's from Wired TV. And some of the other things that we talk about are our phones actually listening? Do our phones do certain things? Do they track us? Remember, there's a couple different things that we have to remember. One is the Wi-Fi that you're connected to can track you, but then the phone itself through your cell phone provider can also track your location. And so a lot of people get these two things confused because if you aren't sending or receiving data, you are still available for a phone call. So your phone may still be tracking you even if you're not on Wi-Fi. And he kind of explains this a little bit.
You seek the key, but you must first learn the discipline. Unlock the energy within.
With Amex Gold, you can
Sorry,
earn
guys,
over
we're getting
$400
close. I
back in
apologize,
diamond
but
value annually.
that's the only way I can get
So
the
sharing
videos in a
the same
PowerPoint here.
taste is extra sweet. That's the powerful backing of American Express.
Have you ever asked yourself, is my phone listening to me? Is my phone watching me? Does my phone track me even when it's off? Maybe the real question is, does it even need to? Here to set the record straight, I'm David Payan, former Apple Store tech and smartphone expert. This is Tech Truths. Are our phones listening to us? The simple answer is yes, but not in the way you would expect. If you want to rest easy, the amount of battery life our phones would use if they listened to everything you said all the time would drain its battery very fast. Let's use this iPhone 14 Pro as an example. In the case of Hey Siri, the first sounds it listens for is not hey. It's s. It isn't transcribing your words or entire sentences. It's not nearly powerful enough for that. Instead, it's listening for a specific sequence of sounds, which is called an acoustic model. The takeaway is that your phone is absolutely listening to you, but it can only recognize one thing. Hey Siri, kind of like my cats. Whenever I say food, the phone's main processor is a lot more powerful than its always-on processor, but that power comes at a cost, battery life. So it's the always-on processor that always listens for trigger sounds. When the always-on processor hears an S sound, it triggers a kind of built-in checklist. Was the S preceded by a high front vowel, like A? Was it followed by another front vowel, like E? If all the boxes get checked, the always-on processor wakes up the A16 Bionic for help. Now that the phone's main processor is involved, the possibilities for analyzing your voice are endless. Of these four companies, Apple's privacy policy for Siri is by far the clearest and the safest, at least in terms of your personal privacy. So what can you do to protect your privacy as much as possible? If you go to the Settings app on your phone and disable Hey Siri, Hey Google, or Hi Bixby, then none of this happens at all. Are our phones watching us? No, and they don't have to. Social media companies can all infer our emotions and our reactions based on our behavior. And what about TikTok? They've been all over the news lately. TikTok collects both face prints and voice prints from content that you upload to their servers. Doesn't sound great, but it gets worse. TikTok uses pre-uploading to send photos and videos from your phone to their servers even before you choose to share it publicly. From TikTok's privacy policy, we may collect biometric identifiers and biometric information as defined under US laws, such as face prints and voice prints, from your user content. Where required by law, we will seek any required permissions from you prior to any such collection. They'll ask our permission to do it, but only if they're legally required to. That doesn't exactly make me feel better. Do our phones track us even when they're off? There's no right or wrong answer to this one. Does your phone ever really turn?
You seek the key, but you must first learn the discipline. Unlock the energy within.
Brainstorming is my superpower, not organization. So Canva Whiteboards gets all my ideas sorted with one simple click. Sorted.
Sorry,
Do our phones
guys.
ever really turn all the way off? The answer to that question is no. The always-on processor stays running in the background even when your phone's operating system isn't. But that doesn't necessarily mean you can be tracked. On iPhones, Find My works even when your phone is powered off. But it's not your phone that's tracking you. All of the other Apple devices that are part of the Find My network can locate your device and report its location to Apple servers. Androids are a different story. You can find a Samsung Galaxy phone when it's offline, meaning cellular data or Wi-Fi are turned off, but not if the phone itself is turned all the way off. Google's Find My Device feature is one step further behind that. You might be able to find your phone's last known location, but you won't be able to see any live location if it isn't connected to the internet. If you want to not be findable, you can disable Find My when you power off your phone. First, press the side button and either volume button till slide to power off appears on the screen. Then tap the tiny text below the slider that says iPhone Findable after power off. Then tap temporarily turn off finding, enter your passcode, and power off your phone. All right, time for rapid fire. Let's.
And we'll end it there. There's a couple more things there that he does talk about, but I think we kind of get the general drift of what he's talking about. So yeah, the problem is our social media companies, and this is why Facebook or Meta had this big problem or issue. There were things that needed to be challenged in their terms of service, and so somebody finally got together and actually sued Meta February 4th of 2009. This is when the federal government doesn't necessarily work the way it should, right? On the lawsuit side with these challenges. Why? Because we trust that these companies are acting in their best behavior or best interest. The problem is they don't always do that. So when Meta got caught hiding or taking or saving information on users, this was part of the problem. They were sharing a lot of information with third parties. And we've now seen this huge uptick in advertising on Facebook or Instagram. And so that's kind of what started this all the way back in 2009. And so the first lawsuit starts in February 4th. They then settle to keep, all these things with the FTC. Finally, because they don't do this, the FTC talks about their inaction. And then finally, there's a huge exploit in March of 2018 that Facebook users had from the original complaint. Their information, their data was illegally disclosed. So it wasn't just the fact that they were sharing information. Facebook or Meta was doing it illegally. And so again, when did that start? 2009. We're at 2018, and they don't get the big settlement of the $5 billion until 2022, I think. So it took that long for the FTC to finally take action. So not only did Meta get in trouble and have a penalty, not only did privacy structures of all social media companies change, but the FTC actually had to do some internal looking, and they came up with some new tools on how to find different actors and make sure that they check on what they say they do. They also had the other thing happen in 2023 where 33, I think it got up to 39 states, their attorney generals sued Meta because of what they do specifically with children, people under the age of 18, because Meta allows people under the age of 14 to have accounts. And so the problem is they allow them sometimes in some mannerisms adult access, and that shouldn't be allowed. Additionally, some of the other things that we've talked about earlier, right, where Meta allowed certain things to happen that shouldn't have happened, and so it does. I mean, they do allow for people to be followed. One of the other questions that people had, and this is a really good chart. I like to toss that in. We talked about routers and how people access with a VPN, right? That tip of the iceberg is what we contact every day on the World Wide Web through 4 or 5 main, servers, right? Internet Explorer, Firefox, all those. And so that deep web is that part that you really have to work at to get into, to get information, to find information or share information. But the dark web, I mean, it sounds really scary, but that's where we're actually seeing criminal activity. But it's accessed very, very differently. If you don't know what you're doing, and I do not have a clue how to access the dark web. You could go in. We see human trafficking, weapons sales, drug sales, different things like that. It really is different. I don't know how to access it. There are a few people in our department that do, um, monitor that stuff. They're all done in Lansing at our fusion center. They do a terrific job. They get bombarded by about 1,400 different things every day. So we think that we're immune, but we're not. There really is a lot going on. They say the three bad actors really: North Korea, China, and Russia. And it's not necessarily the government sponsored stuff. It's just groups that are in those countries because they know that extradition is very unlikely. So that's what we're seeing on a global scale. That is a completely different conversation for later, for a different time. Last thing that I'll leave you with from this guy is pretty good stuff.
All right, so the real problem of humanity is that we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology, as said by E.O. Wilson, the father of sociobiology. And the problem is that these three operate on three different clock rates. What happens when your godlike technology is accelerating faster than your steering wheel, which is your medieval institutions? And your Paleolithic emotions, your ape-like instincts, are guiding the whole thing. So when I was a kid, I was a magician, and magic is all about studying the limits of our Paleolithic emotions. And while we were all looking out for the moment when technology would overwhelm human strength, that's when it takes our jobs, that's when it's smarter than us, we miss the much earlier point when technology actually undermines human weaknesses. And this is the point that I would argue all the things we're experiencing are going wrong with technology. Because when technology hacked our cognitive limits, our mental limits, we feel that as information overload. When it hacked our dopamine system, we feel that as addictive use. When it hacks our social validation, we feel that as mass narcissism. Everyone has to be an Instagram celebrity. When it hacks our confirmation bias, we feel that as fake news, that it feels good to get information that already confirms our beliefs. And when it hacks our outrage, we feel that as polarization. And when it hacks our trust, the foundations of what we know to trust or be true, we feel that as deep fakes or post-truth. And when you look at what this set of things causes, information overload leads to shortening attention spans.
This is everything that we deal with,
depression,
right?
Suicide, breakdown of sense-making, conspiracy theories, and a post-truth world. And these are not disconnected problems because they live in a connected system of mutually reinforcing harm. And we call this system human downgrading. We have to fix it.
And so one of the other things that Tristan Harris did is we've actually done this now in a couple different schools. I've talked to, a lot of times it was just a sports team or maybe the National Honor Society at a school, but they actually did what they called a 30-day detox from social media. First, there's a couple modules, and this is from Tristan Harris's company that he talked about earlier. So they talk about what an attention economy is. Each of these are about 30 to 45 minutes. They talk about the persuasive technology, how this stuff tries to get us addicted, how social media works in our brain. So the actual physical cognitive changes that we see, the consequences that we see, how we emotionally get involved. They get kids to tell their social media story, and then how you take control of your social media use. We talked about the grayscaling and some of those other things, and then how humane technology should look later on. If we have Apple Watches, right? How can we take those Apple Watches and monitor somebody that has given us signs of what someone looks like when they're feeling suicidal, and then give alerts to people that can help that person? There are telltale signs, so there should be ways to make that happen. And then how we post our thing on our social truth, and then teaching this humane technology, and get this information out there for other people. So the other really interesting thing is, and I'm just going to leave you with this, right? So we had this theoretical conversation about 6 years ago with Governor Snyder, and he asked us, how is law enforcement going to look like? What's it going to look like 20 years from now? And so we started to talk about, okay, So let's say we have somebody that weaponizes a drone, right? And so now this drone is going to hurt somebody. Do we need to write a search warrant to grab your drone to down that person's drone? Or do we need a laser beam shooting satellite, right? And so we're laughing at these. And he laughed and he said, okay, stop. What is the plot behind Olympus Has Fallen? And we started thinking about it. Morgan Freeman, the president, sitting in the Potomac River fishing, right? All of a sudden, this drone swarm pops up. And because of facial recognition, the drones start taking out with C4. They start exploding into Secret Service agents because they're recognizing them with their facial features. Isn't that kind of sort of what we've already done in Afghanistan? Yeah, that technology is 4 years old, 6 years old, 8 years old. And so we really forget about these things. And so we were laughing and we're talking about Geordi, right, on Star Trek, where he was blind, but he had these glasses on. Well, Google and some places in Connecticut and Boston, they're actually looking at how you can take AI and cameras and place it around somebody, and then it cognitively is fixed to their brain. So if they are blind, they can actually have the use of cameras to give them vision. And they're talking about not only that, but you can change it to infrared or heat vision or whatever it is. And they say that that technology is right around the corner for people that have visual problems. It's amazing the changes that we've seen with people that have limbs, right? Travis Mills, who grew up the next town over from me, Travis comes back from being a soldier, and he is a quadriplegic, and he has 4 missing limbs. The technology that they have been able to give him allows him to function almost like a normal person. How is that going to change and get better in the next 5, 10 years? It's going to be amazing what this technology does. So to say that technology and social media is all bad is completely wrong. It's going to give us the ability to do things and push boundaries. The problem is it's going to push a lot of boundaries, not just the ones we want it to. And so that's kind of how I'll turn it back over to you guys, and we'll open it up for questions.
All right. It looks like there's been a lot of comments. This gives a lot to think about, and
Yeah.
just it's a lot to take in. I do have a question. Do you suggest any videos or other folks online that parents can watch with their kids to help them understand these dangers? The videos you showed were fabulous, thinking my 12-year-old needs something more simple to grasp.
Yeah, the problem is your 12-year-old is probably grasping things that are well beyond our capabilities. Um, we forget that our kids, ever since 3, 4, 5 months old, in utero, right? They are like sponges. So they may not have the verbal capacity, but they are already absorbing technology like crazy. Um, I would probably look at Chris's website, because most of that he has is age appropriate conversations too. So I would definitely look at that. And again, I'm not trying to plug a product. Our attorney general has some information out there on their website specifically about how to make sure that you're not victimized. There's a lot of things, different places, even our social media um, apps, right? If you go to Facebook and Snapchat, Meta, they actually have information on their base website about how to do things in moderation, how to limit time, how to put caps on what is and isn't acceptable. But these are all personal decisions, and so it's got to be what fits for you and your family too. I know, me personally, none of our kids didn't have gaming systems in their rooms. They couldn't charge their computers in their rooms. And the biggest thing is sleep deprivation. When I do presentations, probably 30%, we talked about this in the first presentation, probably about 30% of kids will raise their hand that they actually sleep with their phone under their pillow just so they don't miss a connection with a friend if they hit them up after they go to bed. So we didn't let them charge anything in the room. Everything had to be in the living room. And then we as parents did the same thing. An alarm clock costs $8. Use the old fashioned alarm clock.
I know you talked a lot about AI, and we did have a question. It says, how would you suggest dealing with the newer tech that can take a clothed image and nude it, as well as take the image and make it act? Does that fall under like some of the new laws they're looking into, or?
Yeah, so in Michigan, we don't have those new laws to tell us. So a lot of prosecutors right now are just taking the old law and they're saying, okay, is this still affecting a victim? And if the answer is yes, they're pushing it to the limit with the old law until we get a new law to replace it. Pam and a couple other groups that join our prosecutors' offices in all 83 counties have had some of these discussions. Legislators are trying to get on top of this. I think there are already a couple different House and Senate bills that are formed. So it'll take a little bit before we finally get the verbiage right between the bills. But I would think that we're going to see something pretty quickly because it can affect a lot of people.
I'm just trying to scroll and see if there's any other questions. We have a lot of comments. Thank you very much for all the information.
Oh, absolutely.
A lot of people saying they're going to be checking their settings and that this is a great presentation.
Well, thanks.
People talking that they think this is a good information that needs to be taught in schools. But I think for the most part, someone did make a comment about the routers and how they can be reset on the bottom, and that it may be a good idea to lock those up. Do you have any, like, lock up your router? Any
Yeah,
information on
absolutely.
that?
They should be password protected. You should be changing it just like your phone, right? Every month or so. Um, because yeah, everybody, we're very loose. I know most troopers that I work with even, right? We laugh about it, but we have a little book in our locker that's got all of our passwords, and the funny thing is nobody locks their lockers, right? So it's pretty easy to goof around with somebody and change your desktop on their computer. Not that I've ever done that to Mike Cisco. Yeah, full disclosure, I have. But it's one of those things where the router's the same thing, and if you've never changed that original password because it's convenient, right? We're sacrificing convenience and safety, and it's always this delicate balance. Doing that two-party authenticator, right? Where not only do you enter a password, but you have to have a phone call or a text to your phone to verify it is who you are. Those are things it does take time, but those are things that we should be doing because our phones are trying to be convenient. But what happens when you get rid of your phone or your kid sells their Xbox? It's amazing that parents don't remember that because their kid had Xbox Gold or Xbox Live or whatever the PlayStation version is of the same, right? Their credit card information is stored in that Xbox. And if you never delete it off of there, it's still there when that kid sells that gaming system. It's the same thing with our phones, right? When we get rid of our phone and trade it in, when it's done with that cycle every 2 years, um, that information is pre-saved and stored unless you've done that factory reset. And so we forget that our phones and stuff save a lot of our information.
All right. I think we got all the questions answered. I want to thank you again, Corey, for taking the time to be
Hey,
with us
anytime.
today. Very good presentation, a lot of eye-opening information. And I want to just thank everyone else for attending the session. We hope you found the information shared valuable. Before we wrap up, I just want to remind you of the upcoming presentation we are offering on October 15th at 10 a.m. on developing your digital consciousness. This presentation will discuss the need for empathy and kindness in our digital decision making, and learn to identify and prevent issues like cyberbullying, poor social media decisions, and many other digital issues that can have permanent effects on our lives. To register for this webinar, please visit our website at www.sccmh.org under the Education and Outreach tab, and then go to the free classes. Also, we would greatly appreciate your feedback on today's presentation. A survey link will pop up on your screen once you exit the webinar, and we kindly ask that you take a few minutes to complete it. Your input is crucial in helping us improve future events and better meet your needs. If you have requested professional credits, your certificate will be sent to you via email within a couple of weeks. Thanks again for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next time. And thank you again, Corey.
Hey, take care, guys.
Bye.